And we are sending good thoughts out to French actress Catherine Deneuve, who suffered a minor stroke this week, but apparently is recovering. But sending good thoughts out for her full recovery. One of the all-time great grand dames of the movies.
Yes, not just beautiful. Umbrellas of
Cherbourg.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Aside from being a beautiful movie, it really is a beautiful movie.
Yeah.
What is she, maybe 16, 17 in that movie? I don't know.
Like 19.
Really
maybe.
young.
Yeah, super young.
Ridiculously young. And she's just so mature in that movie, and always has been. She, she's from that era, her, Bardot. They're all from the same.
Yeah.
But
Jeanne Moreau's a little
bit older. But she was never a kitten, a sex kitten.
No.
As beautiful as any of them.
No.
But never a sex kitten.
No.
It was always the sort of intelligent thing that she had going on.
And a lot of that is owed to, I mean, she kind of came up with, along with her sister, who is in the Young Girls of Rochefort with her, and then her sister died in that horrible car accident prematurely. Would have been a big star as well.
Yeah.
Was already on her way. Was a bigger actress at the time. Very, very sad. But Catherine Deneuve still with us, still acting, still absolutely wonderful. So sending all of our good thoughts out. We got a big show this week. We have an interview with the filmmakers of The Swan Princess, which is out in a 25th anniversary Blu-ray, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, and which I have a great story that goes along with that. But first, we got new movies, and then we have a lot of catalog stuff, like a lot of catalog stuff. Most of it Kino. Kino has come out just with an unbelievable blitz of material in the last few weeks, and it's really an extraordinary bunch of stuff. So we want to put all of that on your radar, and I'm just going to dive right into it.
I did want to ask you about something.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
It's getting me that time of the year where we start to get swag.
Oh yeah,
because
it's
award season.
Yeah,
there was some big awards last night over in Santa Monica. Something. I don't even know, but it's like the first one of the season.
I haven't opened that yet.
You haven't opened that yet?
I haven't. I've been afraid to take the shrink wrap off.
The thing,
I have.
And I used to not. I would just leave them wrapped up forever.
I knew what it was the second I got it. I thought, oh, it's becoming the annual Jordan Peele thing.
And you know what? They go big.
They do.
They go big. It's a big old book that we're talking about.
Yeah.
What, coffee table size? Not that big, but it's big.
For
us. For the movie Us. The book is called Pieces of Us. And what they do in this book is he goes through and he explains every piece of symbolism in the film.
That's great.
So all of that stuff that folks have been like, well, what did this mean? And what did that mean? Jordan just go through here. Here it is. This is what it means. Here it is. And this is what it means.
But this is what I think won him the Oscar last time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that they sent out that big old book.
Mm-hmm.
Which
get out.
It was a big old beautiful get out. The sunken place, and it. And what it said was, we know you enjoyed the movie, but now we're going to give you some reasons why you should watch it again.
Yeah,
and realize it's a more meaningful and a deeper movie than you even realize at this point in time. We want you to understand that Jordan Peele is not just he's not just a horror filmmaker. It's not suspense and whatnot. There's some real thought. He's an artist.
Yeah.
And there's some real thought to this. And that book, everyone who got that book, that was money well spent.
Oh, yeah.
They got that book and they thought,
and a lot of it is confirming. We watch these movies and we think, I think I know what's going on there. And Jordan, so it's a lot of fun. And I used to never open those things because I was, figure out selling on eBay years from now. But I don't do that anymore. I sort of pieced them out to the family.
It even has a time code.
It even has a time code. At this point in the movie, go to this time code and you'll see this thing. And that's what it means. And what I do like is, a good bit of it I kind of figured out. I was moving along with it. I'm like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I think I understand what the hell this wacky movie is about.
Apple. No kidding. He gives there's a Bible quote.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And the reason for it and what it all means. I rather enjoy that. So Jordan's not just fooling around. He's actually making movies about stuff.
See, I love that.
In the genre.
In the genre. But he's doing it with so much forethought.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I really love that.
He's the kind of the reverse of Eli Roth. who just throws it all through just get some people and throw them through a blender or whatever, a meat grinder. Let's just do that.
I mean, if you think about it, Us, is it a horror film? There's not really a lot. There's not a lot of. There's not a lot of. I mean, there's some violence in it, but relatively little.
Yeah. It's psychological.
It's all psychological.
Right.
Yeah.
I wrote a little essay about it. You can find it. You read it over at our website, the DigiGods website.
See the apple now. The candied apple has all this new meaning for me. That's so fantastic. Yeah. Oh, that's so fantastic. No, there's Luke. Now I've got to go pull the wrapping off. That's fantastic. Luke Thompson, our good friend Luke, colleague Luke. Luke had a take on it that was utterly fascinating, utterly fascinating. Which it didn't even occur to me, and it should have, because Jordan's mom is white, and Luke said this movie is basically about being torn between two cultures and two identities and wrestling with that. And I thought, oh my gosh. And Luke's understanding of it, he said, because that's where I came from. Because, Luke's from Ireland. And so he grew up here with this kind of, he had an Irish education and upbringing and then, adapting to America. And there's a certain pull on that in that same sense. So he feels the same thing. And I thought, well, hell, I'm half German. I grew up with like at family gatherings where I couldn't understand a word that anybody was saying. Like, I relate to that too. On a certain level. Anyone who has sort of a biculturality, or if you're biracial, or if you sort of come from two conflicting worlds, is going to relate to that. That should have dawned on me.
That duality thing, when you look at those scissors,
that's it. That's it. The scissors.
Duality thing, and they don't work at all unless they're together.
Yeah.
A pair of scissors that's broken apart is really like a completely useless thing. So that duality thing is going on there, and he's definitely speaking to that. Even in a deeper way than just the race, the mother and the father thing, it's just what these dualities bring. One side of the duality brings you all kinds of things. Yeah. So living, because his mother is who his mother was, Jordan grew up on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Yeah. Because of that side of his family. Yeah. The other side of his family didn't live on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. They live down in the hood. Yeah. And, you're this kid and you got this like, because of that, this, because of that, this. And all of that is all the way through that movie, and it's really, really...
It's interesting, because when it came out, everybody was saying, it's going to be another Oscar run for Jordan Peele, and that kind of faded from the conversation as we get into Jojo Rabbit and a few other things. The late year stuff always sort of overshadows the earlier year stuff, but... This is a smart campaign. Yeah, it's got people talking and thinking again. So I don't know if they're going to give him another Oscar. There's a lot of contenders, but I'll tell you this: it's in the running. Yeah, and it's going to get, and Lupita's going to get nominated.
For sure.
Yeah. That's a done deal. She's got her nomination locked up. So. Yeah, that's a hell of a performance.
Love the book.
Oh my goodness, great book.
Keep an eye out for that.
Pieces of Us. The swag we get, and we're going to get a lot more of it.
So much.
Screeners are already pouring on me and whatnot. But I will also say this, as long as we're here: Ford versus Ferrari. I have not enjoyed a movie that much in years. In years, what an absolute and utter blast! Yeah. Yesterday, 3 times, I remembered a scene from the movie. And I laughed out loud and embarrassed my family in public. It's like, what are you laughing at? What's so funny? I was just thinking of this scene in Ford versus Ferrari. Really? You're thinking of a scene. You were just thinking of a scene and you're laughing out loud. It's a funny scene. What can I tell you? It's a really, really, really good scene. It's a really good scene. Oh, anyway. All right, well, let's. I'm gonna dive in here with some. We're gonna break up all the catalog stuff, and then we're gonna do some of the new movies, and then get back to catalog stuff. In the end, we're gonna wrap out with the Swan Princess interview. Some really good stuff from the Kino Classics, not the Studio Classics line, but the regular classics. A lot of really wonderful stuff here. But first, before I get into that, is the Zeitgeist release. We talked about this some weeks ago, and they are releasing it officially again, which is Tom Sachs' Space Program, the director's cut on Blu-ray from Zeitgeist through Kino. And this is Tom Sachs doing it. This is a really kind of very interesting avant-garde-ish effort. We talked about it originally the first time. Just want to put this back at everybody's radar again. This is Tom Sachs is kind of a more than just a filmmaker. He's an artist, not a performance artist, but like an installation artist, and it's about building the space program in this kind of art installment, and it's very, very interesting. This includes the theatrical cut and some short films by Tom Sachs. Really, really very interesting. It's he's an unusual guy, and this is effectively drawn from his historic art presentation, Space Program 2.0 Mars. So worth checking out. Tom Sachs' Space Program, the director's cut. Really, really interesting stuff. So now, from the Kino Classics line, here's what we got. My goodness, it's sort of all over the map, but it's all really, really interesting stuff. And the most important one of all of these is the Buster Keaton film Our Hospitality. This has been out before. This is, but there's no copyright on these silents anymore, so it's all about the source materials. This is from the Lobster and Black Hawk libraries, and it is one of the all-time Keaton greats, beautifully, beautifully restored. 75 minutes long, 1923. Really just you're going to love it. Natalie Talmadge, who was Buster Keaton's wife at the time, is lovely in it. This includes an audio commentary with Farron Smith-Nemi and Imogen Sarah Smith. It also includes a short film, A Duel to the Death, from 1947 that starred Buster Keaton, an aging Buster Keaton, but before he was on Twilight Zone. And the short film The Iron Mule, as well as a presentation on the film by Serge Bromberg, and a documentary on the recording of the score by Robert Israel. So Our Hospitality from Kino Classics and Lobster Films, absolutely superb. Don't miss it. Buster Keaton, one of the all-time greats. From the exploitation end of things, Kino Classics goes a little bit far and wide. This is really interesting. This is The Bloody Brood, which is probably not known to a lot of people. Bloody Brood is from 1959. It is a Canadian exploitation film just on the cusp of when these kinds of things really explode in the 1960s. And Julian Rothman, who is primarily known for doing a cult 3D movie in the 1960s, this was his very, very first film, and it's very raw in that early beatniky way. Like Corman was experimenting with some of this, and what you see in like A Bucket of Blood, The Trip, yeah, all of those elements are sort of woven into this, except it's a Canadian film, and it happens to have a very, very young Peter Falk making his feature film debut.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about it.
It's fantastic. But it's got drugs, it's got beatniks, it's got a murder investigation. The murder itself is really gruesome. I won't give you the details on it, but it's just really, really well done. It's beautifully shot by Eugene Shuftan, who would win an Academy Award a little bit later for The Hustler. Mm-hmm. So really, really great cinematography. It's just a cool film. And there's a little featurette in here, a 60-minute featurette, that's all about how this kind of fits into the beatnik culture of the time. Audio commentary by Paul Karup of Canucksploitation.com and film historian Jason Pachonsky. I had no idea that Canadian exploitation films had an actual name. Like Australian exploitation films are Ozploitation.
Yeah.
Japanese, they called them Japsploitation.
Yeah.
Black exploitation, we have that here. Canucksploitation?
Never heard of it.
It's a term,
but it's the thing. You got to be a Canuck,
I guess,
or at least Canadian.
Anyway,
that's the thing.
And then there's also a Julian Rothman short film on here from 1954 called Freedom to Read, which is very, very good. It's you see his filmmaking chops really emerging. So The Bloody Brood, great Canadian exploitation film, 1959. Let's see. As long as we're on exploitation and things that are sort of nominally exploitation, Roger Vadim, the one-time husband of Jane Fonda, among others, typically known for doing sort of exploitation-like films, but on a certain level is also a real filmmaker, made some real movies. And one of them was Dangerous Liaisons, or in the French title, Les Liaisons Dangereuses, starring Jeanne Moreau, we just talked about earlier, and Gerard Philippe. And this is also from 1959. One of the more interesting French films of the time, because it's like a contemporary adaptation of Dangerous Liaisons. It contemporizes it. It's basically the same story that we know, except it feels a little bit more lascivious in a modern context.
Yeah,
all the manipulation and the play. When you take the powdered wigs and all the Renaissance-y kind of stuff away from it, it now it feels just sort of dirty.
Kind of dirty. Yeah, I think about that Valmont and Dangerous Liaisons. You know, yeah. That one, I don't know. Yeah, that one is just a little bit skeezier.
But here's the other cool thing. The other cool thing is that the French were nuts about jazz at this point in time in the 1950s. More nuts about jazz than Americans.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have that, we all know Louis Malle's Elevator to the Scaffolds has that great Miles Davis score. Well, Roger Vadim, not to be outdone, said, well, I'm just going to go and get Thelonious Monk to do my score. And you know what? The one thing that prevents this from feeling just really dirty is that Thelonious Monk music.
It makes it all so sophisticated.
It does. It does. It just puts a different veneer on it. It takes you away to that moment in France when, you just kind of want to go to a little underground smoke-filled club and just listen.
Listen to some brother from Tennessee.
Which is where they all went.
Yeah,
they all went to work. Yeah. As long as we're on French films, Bertrand Blier, wonderful filmmaker who I had the privilege of interviewing some years ago, did the wonderful, wonderful movie Buffet Froid, which is otherwise known as Cold Cuts, made in 1979. This is an archival interview with Blier on it. This is a very, very dark comedy with a young Gerard Depardieu in prime form, along with Bernard Blier, the director's father, and Jean Carmet. It's really, really a very macabre film. Depardieu is this guy who keeps people keep dying and he keeps stumbling across the dead bodies. And it's really and that winds up. There's a thing with a knife. I won't tell you exactly what happens, but he winds up getting sort of caught in a Hitchcockian spiral. Just an ordinary guy, and the question is, what's going on? And Bernard Blier plays this police inspector that lives next door to him, and who gets kind of drawn into this. And then you throw in Jean Carmet, and I'm not going to tell you what role he plays, but it winds up kind of going into this completely and totally bizarre direction. It is very representative of what French films were in the 1970s, as they're trying to sort of outgrow the new wave and do something different. And you have people like Godard who went completely off the rails and just started making these non-linear, non-narrative nonsense movies. And everybody else is trying to kind of do something new. Yeah. And this is one of those things. Blier is not a new waver. He's kind of a child of the new wave. Yeah. And he's looking to take French cinema in a new direction. And this is one of those great movies that did that. We also have Jean Renoir's La Marseillaise, made in 1938, which is an interesting time because it's just shortly before World War II breaks out and the Nazis invade France. But nonetheless, this is a really, really wonderful, epic telling of the French Revolution. La Marseillaise is the name of the French national anthem. And this was funded by a public subscription service. Not sure if that's some kind of Kickstarter-y
early
yeah, something like that. But anyways, very, very interesting way it was funded, and it's a very accomplished film, very unusual for Renoir. It's much more epic and sort of less intimate than you would normally expect from him. But it is nonetheless a superb film from his body of work. And some good extras on here, too. There's an archival interview with Jean Renoir and an audio commentary with Nick Pinkerton, who's a film critic, kind of like us.
Yeah.
And then lastly, from the Kino Classics line is The Eagle, starring Rudolph Valentino. Great movie star who made relatively few movies, but they're all famous, and this is one of them. This is a 2K restoration from the original 35mm Elements. It has an audio commentary on it by Galen Studlar, and an Alloy Orchestra score, a brand new score for it. It's pretty terrific. The movie was made in 1925. It is, of course, a silent, and it takes place in 18th century Russia. It's just it's a straight up epic romance, very kind of Dr. Zhivago-y. But the great thing about it is that you really do see precisely why Valentino was and remains a great star. There's just something about that face and that presence that is incomparable. Couldn't make the transition after Sound, one of the many, but boy, what a really terrific movie this is. The Eagle by Rudolph Valentino, fantastic restoration.
A few
some new stuff, yeah.
There was, which some of the stuff is actually pretty good, and I'm glad we're getting a chance to talk about it here now at the beginning of awards season, so we can draw some attention to these things, including this little film called The Weekend, a film by Stella Meiji that stars Shair Zamata, who of course we know from Saturday Night Live. Where she was very funny there, among many other places. This was a neat little movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. It's about a young comedian, Shasir, and she's doing comedy, a stand-up comedy when the movie starts. And she's basically telling a story about how she was with this guy for several years, and then they broke up, and then now he has this new girlfriend, fiance, and how he keeps trying to get her to be friends with his fiance, so they can, they just maintain this friendship, and about how she hates it. And then we begin this movie where we see this young comedian go on this road trip with who? Her boyfriend and his fiance.
Nice.
So she's telling these really neat stories about what's actually happening in her life. What's wicked is that on stage they're so funny. In real life, they're absolutely horrified as they're happening. And it's just a really, really sassy movie. Turns into a bit of a love triangle. I thoroughly enjoyed it. DeWanda Wise in the film, as well as Kim Whitley playing her mother in this wonderful little movie. Special features include a commentary with the writer-director and the lead actress in the film. Check that out if you get a chance. She's funny, Shasir. No matter where she is, she's just absolutely hysterical. I do not know why we needed an Angry Birds 2 movie. The first Angry Birds movie was unnecessary so far as I was concerned.
You know what? I couldn't. The first one was so bad.
Yeah.
I just don't. And I like the game.
Yeah,
I
was not nuts about the game.
But, I wasted too much time on that damn game.
Yeah, it's like, so anyway, we got ourselves an Angry Birds movie, Angry Birds 2 movie. This one has some neat special features on it that you can check out. But look, you got to be into this if you're into this. I'm not particularly into this, the sort of Angry Birds dynamic in this animation. But what the heck, Angry Birds 2, Blu-ray 4K Ultra HD. Shia LaBeouf had a movie that came out a week or two ago called Honey Boy that was very interesting, a sort of dramatic telling of his own life story as a young child actor being raised and taken care of by his father, a rodeo clown who was extremely abusive. And it kind of explained a whole lot about Shia LaBeouf, a young actor who gets himself in a lot of trouble with this and that. Watch that movie, Honey Boy. Before that, though, earlier this year, he was in a highly titled little movie called The Peanut Butter Falcon, which is a wonderful little movie.
That got, and I haven't watched that yet.
It got rave reviews,
including
from me.
From almost no marketing.
Really almost nothing.
Yeah.
One of the things about the film is that the young lead of the film is a young fellow with Down syndrome. Jack Gottenstein is his name. And Zach is just wonderful in this movie. He plays this young man who keeps running away from this home where he's staying and has this caretaker. And he runs off and he hooks up with Shia LaBeouf's character. And they go on this sort of road trip, except that it's not a road trip, it's a river trip because they have a raft. And they sail down the Mississippi. This is what this movie is. It's Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn.
Oh, no kidding.
And I'm watching this movie, I'm like, wait a minute. This is Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. This is why it's clever, though. Shy is playing Huck, and the kid with Down syndrome is playing Tom.
Oh.
He's the rational one who actually knows what the hell is going on.
Great.
While Shia, who effectively is
that's great.
And it's really just the sweetest movie about them going on this trek to find this wrestler that the guy. Yeah. So anyway, I'm hoping that people, Dakota Johnson, John Hawkes also in the film. I'm hoping that people sort of pick back up on this and talk about it. I'm going to be adding it to a little list that you and I are working on. For a whole bunch of film clips.
For the
Peanut Butter Falcon. A few special features. Zach's story, the making of the movie, and which is really, really interesting because it gets behind it a little bit and tells you a little bit about who that young man is, who is a wonderful actor. And this is how I know he's a wonderful actor, because a lot of times we sort of confabulate these things with, maybe they're just... no, he's a wonderful actor, and I'll tell you why. He has timing. He has comedic timing. This kid makes faces, and he would be so.
You gotta watch it.
You gotta watch the movie.
You gotta watch it, especially for award season, right?
Yes,
you think it's gonna get some love?
I think that kid in particular ought to get himself a Best Actor nomination. Want to knock off a few of those?
Yeah. So Kino Studio Classics. So in the Kino Studio Classics line, they just cut a deal with a studio that clearly wants to get rid of a couple of brands. Now we're talking about Disney. Why would Disney want to shed any brands? Disney's all about brands.
Yeah.
Well, Disney is all about Pixar, Lucasfilm, Marvel, and Disney.
Mm-hmm.
The two brands that they kind of want to get rid of are the ones left over from the Eisner-Katzenberg era, which were the more serious movies, notably Touchstone and Hollywood Pictures.
Hollywood Pictures, yeah.
Yeah. So Touchstone was about real movies, things like Dead Poets Society.
Yeah.
And Hollywood
Still sort of family-oriented.
Yeah.
Hollywood Pictures went a little closer to the R.
Yeah. Hollywood Pictures was a little bit crazier. They wanted to be a little close to the R. So we got a bunch of Touchstones, 6 Touchstones and 1 Hollywood Pictures title here that have been licensed to Kino. The Hollywood Pictures one, Tim, tell me if you remember this one. Gone Fishin'.
Did the junket for that movie. Joe Pesci kind of at the end, right before he goes on that long hiatus.
Yeah.
That Joe Pesci,
Gone Fishin' with Joe Pesci and Danny Glover.
Yeah.
That is the weirdest buddy movie. Basically, everybody from the later Lethal Weapon movies, minus Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
So, in any case, this is, they play fishermen. It's a buddy movie with fishermen, and things all go wrong, and, it's basically kind of like a Jerry Lewis movie or with Dean Martin, maybe an Abbott and Costello movie. I mean, it's not very funny. Chris Kane, Dean Kane's dad, who did Young Guns, directed it. It's fine. Roger Birnbaum, did it. Written by Jill Mazursky let me fill people in. Jill Mazursky is Paul Mazursky's daughter.
Yes.
She co-wrote this with somebody who here goes by the name Jeffrey Abrams. Now, I just want to let everybody else know the movie Taking Care of Business with Charles Grodin was the breakthrough script for these two, Jill Mazursky and Jeffrey Abrams. You might know Jeffrey Abrams as J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
But if you don't know that, you're just going to look at this and go, oh, Jeffrey Abrams. And you look back. Yeah, J.J. co-wrote Gone Fishin'. It's not something that's going to show up on a lot of bios.
Yeah.
It was when he was plying his trade. It's a lot of shtick, mostly.
Yeah.
So here are the Touchstone movies, and there's some really good stuff in here. The first one is Billy Bathgate.
Did the junket for that? I'm going to have done the junket for all of these.
Now, Billy Bathgate was a little bit noteworthy at the time. It kind of came in the wake of Bugsy and the movie Mobsters, and it was the same group of characters that were showing up in all these movies at various points in their lives. Some focused on one, some focused on the other. Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel and all these characters.
There was a moment in the early 90s. What is that, 90?
Yeah, 91.
91, yeah.
And they're all show Dutch Schultz, who also showed up in the Cotton Club.
Yeah.
I mean, all these characters from that particular point in time are showing up in all these movies. Everybody was kind of obsessed with exploring that particular milieu of gangsters. Cotton Club was the first one to do it, and then all the rest of these show up. Dustin Hoffman plays Dutch Schultz here.
Yeah.
Much less intimidating Dutch Schultz than James Remar in the Cotton Club, who's a complete psychopath.
Yeah.
But he's still good.
Bill Duke did one back then.
Yeah, Bill Duke did do one. Hoodlums.
That's right. And Tim Roth played Dutch Schultz in that movie. Yeah.
There were a ton of them.
They were all over the place.
All over the place. And then in Mobsters, which is the one where they're all
young. Oh, yeah. Well, they're all young.
Christian Slater.
Patrick, what's his name?
Yeah.
Whatever.
So anyway, the thing, now this is not a great movie. It's got a lot of issues, but a lot of great people are involved in it. And Nicole Kidman, for those who care, does have a nude moment. I won't call it a nude scene. It's a nude moment.
I care, yeah.
Which a lot of people consider one of her career highs for all kinds of strange
Young
reasons.
Nicole Kidman did fantastic naked. Nobody's taking that away from her.
There you go. But what a great cast. Nicole Kidman. Lauren Dean plays the title character of Billy Bathgate, by the way, who's
young Lauren Dean, unknown at the time, relatively speaking.
Yeah, he's a young guy who's working for Dutch Schultz.
Yeah.
That's basically it, which is sort of what Richard Gere did in the Cotton Club, too. But he's it's all through the eyes of this young kid as he's flirting with mobsters and whatnot. Directed by Robert Benton, one of his last films, the director of Kramer vs. Kramer. Written by Tom Stoppard, the great Tom Stoppard, Brazil and Empire of the Sun, and many fine plays. Based on the E.L. Doctorow book, E.L. Doctorow, who wrote Ragtime, Nestor Almendros, who legendarily won an Oscar for shooting Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven. So I mean, a lot of amazing people are involved in this. Mark Isham wrote the music. Bruce Willis shows up in this thing. I mean, it's a very impressive collection of people. It's just not a very good movie.
Yeah.
It just doesn't all hang together.
It tanked at the time.
Tanked.
It tanked at the time, yeah.
Steve Martin, Simple Twist of Fate, which he wrote, which is an absolutely charming film.
Yeah, it also tanked at the time, but nevertheless.
Story of a single dad. It's very, very serious. People expected it to be funny. It's actually quite reflective and directed by Gillies McKinnon, the great Scottish director who hasn't done enough since. But yeah, this is a passion project for Steve Martin, all about parenting and human relationships, and it's a more serious film than what you normally get from him. Gabriel Byrne also very, very good in that. We've also got Life with Mikey with Michael J. Fox, co-starring Nathan Lane, Cyndi Lauper.
Sort of the post Back to the Future Michael J. Fox, who's a little bit more grown up.
Yeah.
But still close to one of his last big sort of like A pictures.
You got to really love Michael J. Fox to love this movie.
Well, I dug the premise of that movie. He was an agent who had once was a child actor.
Yeah.
And of course, Michael J. had been a child actor. And I was sort of like this failing agent of child actors. Yeah. And there's a little girl in that movie who cracked me up. She's a vicious little girl.
She's fine. I don't get this movie.
You never did care for that one?
James Lapine, the great stage director, directed it. Scott Rudin co-produced. Just not my favorite movie. Here's an odd tidbit about it. Alan Menken did the score. Like, when was the last time Alan Menken did the score for a non-animated film? Saving the best two for last, and then I'm going to make mention here of Newport South, which is a really unusual Touchstone film, one of the very last from 2001. This was produced by John Hughes, or executive produced by John Hughes, and written by James Hughes, his son. That's why. Not a John Hughes film, but it's got some interesting performances in it from some up and coming actors, notably Todd Field, who of course would go on to be quite a great director of things like In the Bedroom, and directed by Kyle Cooper. It's like a high school thriller, and it's one of those it's like prep school as horror movies, except not in a prep school. This is just a suburban Chicago high school, but it's just I don't know. It tries to say too much about society, and it tries to use the school a little bit too much as a metaphor for the greater world. It's very ambitious, but it's an unusual movie. Kind of vanished, and Touchstone vanished with it. It's Newport South.
I did not do the junket for that. I don't think there was one.
Here are the two great Touchstone films that I'm going to recommend this week. New York Stories, which is a wonderful film with basically an anthology by Woody Allen, Francis Coppola, and Martin Scorsese. Absolutely delightful. Life Without Zoe is the Francis Coppola film, which was the first big film thing that Sofia Coppola did. She co-wrote it with her dad, and Vittorio Storaro shot it. Nestor Almendros, previously noted, shot the Martin Scorsese short, which was written by Richard Price. And the one that most people seem to like the most is Oedipus Rex, R-W, like Rex, like you wreck a car, which is Woody Allen's. And it's a totally weird, unusual Woody Allen fantasy story that almost goes up there with Zelig. And that one is shot by Sven Nykvist. So worth noting is not only are these three shorts by three particularly great filmmakers, they're also three great efforts by amazing cinematographers. The Scorsese one with Nick Nolte playing the mad artist is also a favorite of a lot of people. But I think the whole thing is still terrific. 1989, New York Stories, really, really a very underrated film. And then lastly, as long as we're on the Scorsese subject, is Martin Scorsese's Kundun from 1997. Came out roughly right after the horrible Brad Pitt. What was the Brad Pitt thing?
7 years in
Tibet. That was it.
Yeah, about Thor. What's his name or whatever? Yeah, Heyerdahl or whatever.
It wasn't Thor, but the
Thor,
other,
but the other
the
guy.
Austrian explorer. Yeah. Anyway, which was nominally about the Dalai Lama through his friendship with this Austrian explorer at the time. Scorsese just said, I'm just going to go with a straight biopic. It's actually a very, very good film. It gets ripped on a lot. Melissa Matheson, who of course wrote E.T., did the screenplay. Roger Deakins shot it. It is a gorgeous looking film. It has a lot going for it. It's an unusual Scorsese film, but it is really, really good. And I would love to have a more elaborate version of it, but this this is as close to a special edition as you're going to get. Audio commentary by Peter Tonguette. There's an interview with Martin Scorsese, interview with Philip Glass, who wrote the score, interview with Melissa Matheson, and then a bunch of documentaries and featurettes. And the documentary itself, In Search of Kundun, which is feature length, is amazing. There's also an interview with the director of the documentary, so you get a featurette on. You get an extra that's an extra for an extra. It's amazing. Another feature-length documentary, Compassion in Exile, EPKs. I mean, they just threw everything at this, and it's worth it. It's a really, really good film. It's very, very underrated. It gets ripped on a lot, but I think it's worth reevaluating. Kundun, The Amazing Story of the 14th Dalai Lama.
A few more newbies.
Yeah.
If we would, this was unfortunate that this movie happened to come out this year, or maybe even the last 4 or 5 years in the context of sort of like Me Too movement. But there it is, and this is when they made it. And what the hell are you going to do? Brian Banks, based on the true story of Brian Banks. Brian Banks was a young high school football player. He was accused of rape by a young woman, and he ultimately convicted of that rape and sent to prison. Yeah. Spent several years in prison.
Lost his entire professional career.
It's just and ultimately the young woman confesses in a phone call to Brian Banks after he leaves prison. She confesses that that didn't happen,
and never seemed to realize the gravity of what she did.
No, and this is so a terrible, terrible circumstance. This is about all of that and how it is all eventually exposed and expunged. She did have a very short professional career, but obviously deeply truncated by the X number of years, maybe a decade that he spent in prison. From 17 to 27.
Such a horrible
story. So that's what this is all about. This movie happens to come out within the context of the Me Too movement. And that's unfortunate. It doesn't mean that this isn't a very powerful and dramatic story that people ought to see and judge on its own merits, the truth of its own merits. Look, they make a couple of mistakes in this movie. But one of them was not casting Aldous Hodge, who's so good in this movie,
unbelievably good,
really good, and probably
carries the whole movie.
And probably a name that we ought to keep in mind as we're thinking about some of these awards. We shouldn't ignore that performance.
We shouldn't let the studios tell us
because
I agree.
Oops, sorry, one of those things. Good boys, this is so stupid funny, this dumb movie. I hate it when these knuckleheads get me, because Seth and all the guys from Superbad and Sausage Party and those movies. They get together and they produce these goofy movies all the time. This one's about these kids in the 6th grade, and in some ways, Judd Apatow and all these guys, they've been making the same movie. Because Superbad is really just that sitcom that they had on in the maybe late 80s, early 90s. That was on for a couple of, I forget what it was called, that sitcom. And then it's like the same thing, and then you take it and you apply it to 40-year-old men, you get the 40-year-old virgin. It's like the same thing. It's about some goofy boys / men of some age and some dumb adventure that they go on. And learn to be a little bit more grown up, usually guided by some women and/or girls. In the case of this movie, girls. They learn to be a little bit more grown up. And I swear to God, this is the exact same movie. It's just 6th graders. Yeah. Instead of it being 40-year-old men, it's 6th graders. At least the 6th graders are supposed to be done. This is R-rated. Crude sexual content, drug and alcohol material, language throughout involving tweens. That's literally what it says in terms of, I didn't even know they could use the word tweens in the rating, but there it is. And it's absolutely true. This is an obnoxious, disgusting little movie. It is so damn funny, and I don't know if I was this boneheaded when I was in the 6th grade as these kids. I don't think so. But then again, if I were, I probably wouldn't admit it. Lots of great special features on here, too, including an alternate, deleted scenes and an alternate ending. As if this dumbass movie needed a different ending. But you know what? It's even more stupid. The alternate ending. So there you go. Love that movie, actually. A lot of fun. The Farewell, which I first heard this on NPR. I forget which but it was to tell the story.
Yeah.
They have this, the grandmother, she's dying. And the whole family wants to go back and celebrate this, but they don't want to tell the grandmother that she's dying. They don't tell her that she's dying. And it's all about how they have to engage in this sort of series of deceptions and emotional upheaval and things that have to be said but can't be said because, we can't actually say why we're actually here.
This is going to get a lot of love in award season. People have been talking about Aquafina all year long.
Yeah.
Also the fact that, here we are, we've moved out of Crazy Rich Asians to a place where now we have these movies that are with all Asian casts and people are finally okay
Chinese
with
family.
it.
Yep. But it's not about them being Chinese. They just
family.
are. It's a family drama based on a loosely true, and it's just the sweetest.
It is based on the director's her own
thing.
actual grandmother and family experience.
Yeah. And I can't remember what NPR show carried. It might have been This American Life.
Yeah.
Kind of feels like a This American Lifer.
Yeah.
Kind of story there. All kinds of special features, audio commentary, and behind the scenes and deleted scenes, and it's just a
lot of love for that movie.
Sweetest damn movie.
So we got 3 here also from the Kino Studio Classics line that are 3 Don Siegel movies from different decades. Don Siegel, of course, most famous probably for directing Dirty Harry and for kind of being a mentor to Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
He directed Clint in a number of films, and Eastwood learned a lot of his directing chops from Don Siegel. Mm-hmm. Don Siegel was always a hard ass, He was. This is a guy who in the 1950s just was always pushing the envelope. He always wanted to go deeper, darker, dirtier, tougher than everybody else wanted to go, and not in like a Samuel Fuller way. Not in like I'm a crazy man and I'm gonna bite your head off way. He was a very gentle but tough guy and really very in control. Super professional filmmaker. And from 1958. We have The Gunrunners, starring legendary war hero Audie Murphy, Eddie Albert, and Patricia Owens. And this is basically about gun smugglers during the Cuban Revolution. That's it. Mm-hmm. And it's fun, and it's tough, and it's rugged, and it's got a lot of really tense moments in it. It's based on an Ernest Hemingway novel, To Have and Have Not, which I have not read, so I can't speak to how faithful it is. But it's a fun movie. A decade later, he made Madigan, which is another great tough guy movie. Madigan stars Richard Widmark, another legendary tough guy, Henry Fonda, Harry Guardino, James Whitmore. These are they're all playing super tough. You get some women in here, Inger Stevens, Susan Clark. But they're kind of window dressing. This is all about the tough guys, and it's a detective film. That's all it is. It's just about New York City cops. And it's a really gritty way. This is kind of one of the stylistic changes in the 1960s. This comes on the heels of In the Heat of the Night, and it's just before the French Connection. So it's doing a little bit of those things, and it's got a great script by once blacklisted screenwriter Abraham Polonsky. Really worth checking out. I just think this movie is just so much fun. It's a great cast, and it's just beautifully directed. And then lastly, from the 1970s. From 1973 is the Don Siegel film, and this feels a lot more like in the vein of Dirty Harry. This is Charley Varrick, Varrick. Charley is spelled Charley. And this has Walter Matthau, the least likely tough guy, playing tough. Joe Don Baker, we're accustomed to him being tough, and he co-stars. But really, this is all about Walter Matthau, who even gets the Lalo Schifrin score treatment.
Yeah.
Which is all about 1970s. This is just a superb, tough film. I'm surprised this is actually still rated PG. I think if they re-rated this would be an R. I gotta be honest. I think in 1973 this was PG, but today, with as skittish as everybody is, this would at least get a PG-13. And you even get Andy Robinson showing up in this, who Siegel also used in Dirty Harry, most famously as Scorpio. So Norman Fell. I mean, it's a great. It's fun watching all the faces kind of pass around here. And the story is basically a mano a mano between Charley Varrick and Joe Don Baker's mafia hitman. Charley's a crook. He's a very shrewd career crook, and they've sent a hitman after him. There you go. That's it. 3 by Don Siegel.
Sweet. Couple more of these?
Yeah.
Let's see. Safe, and the way they structured the title of this was meant to be a television series. It ended up being a movie. It's SAF3. So that's what it looks like when you look at it. But you just call it safe when you see it. And this is actually pretty good, particularly here in Southern California where we've been living. This is set in Malibu amongst a sort of fire rescue team. These guys, Dolph Lundgren, J.R. Martinez, and all these guys are this fire rescue team, smoke jumping kind of guys who are leaping into the fire and pulling people out. And you know what? Given what we've been experiencing, even up until this weekend, this very weekend, right there, the Barham fire, right where I used to live there, I got some respect for these guys.
Oh, they did an amazing job last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and this is a big hero movie with gritty guys with square jaws and a couple of gals with square jaws who have to get the job done, but understand that maybe sometimes one of them might not come home. And from there you can probably figure out what the rest of the television series / movie is about. Pretty good. No special features to speak of. Got a movie called Bliss, which is about this young artist who's getting all this sort of critical acclaim. Everyone wants to know about what her next project is going to be, and it's just all this pressure. And she is working on a thing that she believes will be her masterpiece, but she gets stuck, blocked. Starts doing all kinds of crazy things to break that block: drugs, wacky sex, all this kind of stuff. Spirals into just a turmoil. But it does in fact inform her art. It's a neat movie that speaks to that sort of idea of where art comes from. I don't like the idea that we always have to associate great art with some sort of turmoil and drugs and alcohol and all that. I think that's crap. Best painter I ever knew was that guy who used to paint on PBS. Ross, Gary Ross, I think it was his name. Yeah. Coolest, calmest guy with the fro. Remember the guy with the fro? Yeah. He might have been a little high, but I don't think so. I think he was probably straight and just painting, man. Just painting. Pretenders, a James Franco film. If you look up James Franco's,
he just makes I can't keep up. I can't keep up. For a while there, I sort of appreciated the way he would lend his name to other folks' projects. Yeah. Because if you get James Franco in your movie, you're probably gonna get your movie made, and they'd make these $35 movies. James would walk through them, do this, that, or the other thing, be pretty good, but it would really be about those filmmakers. This is one that's directed by James Franco, and he drags a whole bunch of his fancy friends into it. Brian Cox, Dennis Quaid in the movie, Juno Temple in the movie, Jack Kilmer, who is Val Kilmer's son in the movie. So this is a movie that's trying to be a little bit bigger than the usual sort of James Franco tributary films that he makes. It's not any better though, not really. Anyway, it's about this filmmaker and this director and this actress, and then they get involved with this beautiful actress played by Juno Temple, kind of doing that thing that Juno always does in movies, where she's just completely alluring temptress, which is a good role for her to play because she kind of is an alluring temptress. I'd like to see her do something different.
That would be interesting, and it's about how for years they sort of spin around each other and things eventually slide out of control. Bonus feature, nothing but the theatrical trailer on that one, man. You got a few more over there?
Yeah, let me jump on to some stuff from the 70s, including a couple of AIP Sam Arkoff classics.
Ooh.
Starting with those Street People with Roger Moore and Stacy Keach. And this has one of those taglines I always love to read. The hunting season has opened in the naked city. What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. So Street People is one of those movies that Roger Moore made to try to prove that he could do something other than James Bond, only to prove that he really couldn't, and that when he tried, he just wound up being either James Bond or Simon Templar and everything. He kind of only had that one gear. I mean, he played James Bond as Simon Templar.
Yeah,
frankly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's why he got the job, because he was basically playing Bond on television.
Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, this was a Sam Arkoff production, which meant that it didn't have a lot of money behind it. Co-written by Randall Kleiser of Grease and Blue Lagoon fame, along with Ernest Tidyman, who we know from a lot of blaxploitation classics, and directed by Maurice Lucidi, whom I've never heard of. I have no idea who he is.
It's one of those Italian sort of mashup movies. It's almost like a spaghetti western, only only with gangsters.
That's it. Anyway, it's a whole mafia deal gone wrong and a heroin thing, and they gotta somehow go from Sicily to San Francisco and other locations where I'm sure Sam had some cheap locations. Sam, I'm so glad I got to meet him several times.
Once you get past Stacy Keach in the credits, you got Roger Moore, Stacy Keach, every name after that is Italian.
It's crazy.
Every name after that is Italian.
Return to Macon County from 1975. This feels like too late for this film. Feels like it should have been 1965. In any case, Return to Macon County is noteworthy only because it has a very young Nick Nolte and a shockingly young Don Johnson in it. And this tells you pretty much exactly what's going on. This is a moment when it's all about Dirty Larry, Crazy Mary, and Badlands, if you want a slightly more... look, they're all the children of Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
And this has a tagline that tells you exactly what the movie's about. They gave a lot of thought into this. 2 guys, a chick, and the hottest 57 Chevy on the road. There it is. That's what it is. Throw in some guns, and you're on your way. Anyway, this was basically a sequel to Macon County Line, which is a much better movie. But it's okay. It's fine. It kind of pushes some of the same buttons in a less disciplined way, and that's all you got to know. So they're going to go compete in these drag races, and they pick up a waitress played by Robin Mattson, and next thing you know, they're now in trouble with the law and all the rest of it. So, but fortunately, they have a fast car.
Let's see. I got a couple over here. This film cracks me up a little bit. It's called The Art of Deception. Richard Ryan. Nobody ever heard of. And the conceit of this film is that the criminal organization has developed this virus that will allow it to gain control of the minds of everyone on the planet. The whole damn planet. Not the city, not a country, not mind control. We want to. Now, this is like a conceit from almost like a cartoon. I mean, mind control. This guy, the hero of the movie, a secret agent, must decide whether to save everyone on the planet or his wife, who has been kidnapped. So it's like, that's his big choice. I could save everybody on the planet, all 7.5 billion people on the planet, by the way, which would include his wife, or just his wife. That's the stakes that they set up in this movie. That's ballsy. Those are some ballsy stakes that you set up in a movie that cost $1.95 with nobody in it, with a black Corvette on the cover of it. Nevertheless, there it is. This big ass movie, lots of special features, including the red carpet and the making of and the promotional trailer and all kinds of neat stuff. So these guys are gutsy. I will give them that.
I got
a couple more.
You know what? Let me throw the rest of these 70s ones out there. So more from the 70s. Nightmare in Badham County by John Llewellyn Moxey. Big cast in this one. Deborah Raffin and Chuck Connors.
I love Deborah Raffin.
Tina Louise and Lana Wood, sister of Natalie Wood, Ralph Bellamy. I mean, it's a good kind of B-ish cast for 1976. And remember, everything changes in the following year. Star Wars comes out, and the whole business flips on its head. But they did a new 2K master of this. It has a really, really good look to it. Does a really good job of highlighting Frank Stanley's cinematography. John Llewellyn Moxey, good, strong director of the day. Got another. There's sheriffs in all of these things. This is about these girls played by Deborah Raffin and Lynn Moody, who are just they just run afoul of this horrible, horrible sheriff in this small town played by Chuck Connors, who accuses them of being prostitutes, and they wind up going to this women's prison, and that's where they have to somehow cope with this horrible, horrible injustice that's been inflicted on them because they made the mistake of driving through Badham County. There's a lot of metaphor in this as well. It is an exploitation film nominally, but it's got a lot of really, really relevant stuff in it. Also got a couple of Jeff Bridges performances, young Jeff Bridges, in 2 very interesting films. Winter Kills, directed by William Reichert back in 1979, is still quite an interesting movie, especially if you're a Jeff Bridges fan. He plays the son of a tycoon here, played by John Huston, and half brother of a U.S. president. And there's an assassination story. There's a thing that vaguely is based on the Kennedy assassination. There's a whole kind of a Cuban angle to this. it's quite elaborate and far-reaching, and it does a pretty decent job of elaborating on the novel by Richard Kundun, who wrote The Manchurian Candidate. But it's a little bit hard to sort of wrap yourself around. It's a very, very far-reaching movie. But the reason you really want to watch this, it was shot by Vilmos Zsigmond, who had just recently won an Academy Award for shooting Close Encounters, and it has a great score by Maurice Jarre. And it has some really interesting extras on it, including a William Reichert and Jeff Bridges reunion talking about the film and why it's relevant. And that's very, very interesting.
Oh, dude, Anthony Perkins, Eli Wallach,
I know.
Toshiro Mifune.
It's a sprawling, very far-reaching movie. It's really attempting to make a novel, to sort of wrap itself around all these ideas. Not quite so ambitious, but very fun. The late Michael Cimino wrote and directed Thunderbolt and Lightfoot with Clint Eastwood and Jeff Bridges and George Kennedy too. George Kennedy's a lot of fun in this. But ultimately, you know what? I love the beginning of this movie with Clint Eastwood as a preacher, and then next thing you know, he's ripping off his collar and he's getting out on the lam and the guns and teaming up with Jeff Bridges, and they got big guns and they're gonna rob things, and it's just it's a great, like, cool crime guy movie.
Yeah.
They don't make these anymore. Movies that sort of celebrate the
you can't make these anymore.
Nah, you can't, because they kind of celebrate the criminal. But boy, it's a lot of fun. This movie used to show all the time on television on ABC, and it's really fun rediscovering it. 1974's Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. Written and directed by Michael Cimino with Clint Eastwood, Jeff Bridges, and George Kennedy. Lots of fun. I really highly recommend it.
Review stuff.
Let's wrap those up.
A couple of these. Let's see. I got a movie here called Bare Knuckle Brawler, which is kind of a neat film just in terms of what it's about. Danny Trejo pops up in this movie. It's about this guy whose brother is a cop, goes into the underground fighting world. And trying to uncover some criminality that's going on there. His brother is killed. He comes home and he goes into the underground fighting world to try to figure out who killed his brother, of course, and figures out that, in this world of no holds barred, bare knuckled fighting, the only thing you could do is try to stay alive. It's actually a pretty brutal movie. It lives inside this world. These movies used to come out all the time in the middle '90s when the Ultimate Fighting world sort of first popped up, and all of those Ultimate Fighting guys would show up in this movies.
Oh yeah,
constantly launched 2 or 3 careers.
Yeah, more than that, like a dozen.
Yeah, sort of like in this genre anyway. Actually, pretty cool. The bonus features include a couple of deleted scenes. 47 Meters Down, a sequel to the 47 Meters movie. In this particular case, you have these young women are going to go diving on this sort of deep sea ruin. They go down there and they realize that they're in this like crazy shark feeding ground, and they have to all sort of figure out how to hide inside these little crevices and corners and figure out how they're going to get themselves back to the boat before their oxygen runs out. And basically you got a lot of cute gals getting eaten by sharks. I don't know why folks like that kind of thing, but they certainly do. Special features include a audio commentary with the writer-director Johannes Roberts, and a little featurette all about the making of the film and why those sharks look so real.
Super cool. Got some stuff from Arrow Academy, and the regular Arrow video releasing line. Arrow Academy, always the higher end stuff, and in this case, they got a great one. 1954 is The Far Country, one of Anthony Mann's great westerns with James Stewart and Ruth Roman. So here's the deal. Jimmy Stewart and Walter Brennan are a couple of guys during the Klondike Gold Rush and the beautiful cinematography in Canada. They went to Canada and shot this. And they are driving cattle from Wyoming to, kind of get up there and get them doggies into Canada. And they wind up running afoul with a judge and all of his evil people. And naturally, Jimmy Stewart has to have a little thing with a saloon keeper played by Ruth Roman. And, they wind up having a shooting war, and it's just a great Western. It is a cool movie. It's a very simple narrative, but it's a cool movie. Written by Borden Chase and released at the time by Universal. Pretty great. A lot of great stuff on here. It's a 2-disc set, limited edition, and tons of extras here, including 2 different presentations of the film in different aspect ratios because it was released in a roadshow edition at 2:1, but also at 1:8:5, so you can watch it either way. They also have a documentary on Anthony Mann and his entire Western career at Universal and everything else that he did, which is very, very interesting and very, very comprehensive. And a thing called Man of the West, which is a film critic, Kim Newman, sort of reevaluating the films of Anthony Mann, and of course a very, very good audio commentary by Adrian Martin. So there's that, and then the regular Arrow stuff, a little bit kind of kitschier and sleazier. They're probably not sleazy. It's, not to be mean or anything, but we're gonna start off with Donald Sutherland, Chad Lowe, and Mia Sara in Apprentice to Murder, which is perfectly fine. Mia Sara, whatever happened to Mia Sara? She just kind of vanished after Legend, right?
Yeah.
And she had something on TV that she did.
Yeah, she was a thing there for a while.
I mean, Ferris Bueller too.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, she just kind of went away.
Was she the girl in? No, that wasn't.
I want to say Queenie. Was it Queenie?
Yeah,
on
maybe
TV?
that might have been it.
Miniseries on TV. Can't believe I would actually remember that. Anyway, look, it's called Apprentice to Murder. There's a murder in it, and there's an apprentice, and that's kind of all you need to know. Donald Sutherland plays this kind of folk healer who runs afoul of the people around them, and there's kind of everything goes in a really macabre line, and things get a little dark and sleazy. Can't really say it any other way. This is a special edition, has some interesting stuff on it. There's an audio commentary by Brian Reisman. There's a new video interview with Kat Ellinger, the film author and film critic, about the genre of religious horror, which is kind of a genre, I guess, if you can sort of include things like The Believers and The Exorcist and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The Omen, even The Omen would probably qualify for that. And makeup supervisor gets an interview on here as well. So there's that. And then there's also 2 other films from Arrow, Flowers in the Attic, which has kind of a cult following because it's based on a rather famous book from 1979, which had all kinds of sequels and sold millions and millions and millions of copies. The subject. I mean, you get into some pretty icky child abuse stuff with the subject matter here. Flowers in the Attic is, Louise Fletcher is a scary lady in this. Let's just say that she's scarier than she is in Cuckoo's Nest. She's the worst grandmother ever, and she's the last grandmother that you ever want to be locked up in the attic of. That's bad grammar, but anyway. Young Christy Swanson also in this thing. Jeb Stewart Adams from The Goonies. And, I don't recommend it, but it has a cult following for a reason. And lastly, Hitchhike to Hell from Arrow. Hitchhike to Hell is a... it was directed by Irvin Berwick, who is kind of a cult director, and I don't really know anything about Irvin Berwick. He'd made a movie called Malibu High, which didn't exist when the movie was made. It does now. Very weird. But he made this in 1977, kind of a late exploitation film of its kind. And it's about a guy who, delivers dry cleaning, and while he delivers dry cleaning, he picks up hitchhikers and he punishes them. That's it. It's apparently inspired by some real life serial killer stuff. A little bit icky, but because it's an exploitation film from 1977, it has kind of a period veneer that is, Tim, tell us what wonderful criterions we have this week.
Well, Daytrippers. Man, I love this movie so much. Greg Mottola's first feature film anyway. Greg would go on to give us Superbad and direct Adventureland, all kinds of great movies. But this very, very first film of his just marked. It's one of those moments of where a sort of talent showed up and hung around for a very, very long time. Hope Davis, Stanley Tucci, Ann Mira, Parker Posey, Liev Shriver, Campbell Scott in the movie. It's just this absolutely wonderful little movie about these ordinary people living their lives in this neat little indie film where we wander around with this as they ride around on this train. It's just the sweetest movie. This is the 4K digital restoration approved by the director. Greg Mottola. It's got all kinds of great stuff on it, including commentary tracks from Steven Soderbergh and Hope and Parker Posey and Liev and Campbell Scott. And another short film that Greg made back in 1985. This was just a really neat
good film.
movie.
It's a good. It's still one of Mottola's best films.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful movie.
Just the simplest, most wonderful little movie.
Parker Posey's so good in it.
Yeah,
so good.
1996. Needless to say, did the junket for this. Matewan, John Sayles' film.
Fantastic.
Just this fantastic film. John Sayles, John Sayles' story needs to be told in a film.
Yeah, it does.
Because he's really, he was a novelist.
Yeah.
John Sayles made Karen Kusama's career.
He sure did.
Literally gave her the money to make her film. Made
Girl Fight.
Brother from Another Planet. When I was in the early '80s when that movie came out, it was as if a black filmmaker had made a movie. And then you go and you look at this guy John Sayles, who's from this particular station in life. So this is Matewan, written and directed by John Sayles, gives us a young Chris Cooper. It's in the 1920s, coal mining country.
Yep.
The coal miners are trying to form a union. The coal mining company doesn't want that union. It's a brutal, ugly time. This is, of course, all historically true. They bring in these black and Irish strikebreakers to work and they're sort of like caught between Italian strikebreakers. And they do this on purpose because they know that even with the Irish and the Italians, there's going to be all kinds of racial enmity between these groups of people. And these blacks and these Italians and the Irish are sort of caught between the coal mining company and these coal miners. James Earl Jones, Mary McDonnell in the movie. It's just David Strathairn, young Gordon Clapp. This is just really a wonderful, wonderful film from John Sayles. Again, 4K digital restoration supervised by Sayles. A number of wonderful documentaries on the making of the film that include people like James L. Jones, who you don't get to see much of anymore, and Mary McDonnell and David Strathairn. In an interview with the composer Mason Daring, a short documentary on the impact of this film. This film had a lot of impact on a whole bunch of things that were going on during that period, including because we were in 1987. We had not long before that come off a bunch of strikes that completely destroyed the way unions worked in this country, including the air traffic controllers strike. Which was about 1980, 1981. So this film sort of played into a whole bunch of that stuff. Beautiful movie, Criterion Collection, Matewan. One more for me, When We Were Kings, the 1996 documentary.
So good.
About the 1974 fight in Zaire between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. George Foreman, of course, had already won the title from Ali previously. The great Don King offers both fighters $5 million apiece to fight one more time. They accept.
How much did Don King make out of that?
Oh, Don probably. and this is people. Where did Don get the money? Because Don had to get the money. Don got the money from the dictator. In Zaire.
Yeah.
And that fight was more than a fight. It was a musical festival. All kinds of stuff was going on. B.B. King was there. James Brown performed there. There was this whole art thing going on there. And this filmmaker sort of filmed it all. And it was an extraordinary moment. Look, there had been the Thriller in Manila.
Yeah.
But this battle in Zaire was quite a thing. The Rumble in the Jungle is what they called it. And, it was George Foreman was 10 years younger than Ali. 10 years younger than Ali. And Ali said a few things that are regrettable, but captured in this film, which I think makes
it makes it a better film.
Makes it a better film.
Yeah.
Again, a new 4K digital transfer, 5.0 surround sound. Remastered audio track, that Soul Power documentary, which features a lot of that music we're talking about, the B.B. King and all this stuff. In this film, interesting. Of course, we have all the characters from the day back in 1974, but we also have folks reflecting on the events of the day. So we have Spike Lee in this movie in 1996 reflecting on what that event meant to young black folks back in 1974. Me and him would have been about the same age in 74, 13, 14 years old. And all of these things were huge in the community when we were watching it. So this is just an extraordinary film. When We Were Kings, directed by Leon Gask.
Don King is 88 years old.
Yeah,
just want to
probably still making trouble.
Just want to let people know that. Yeah. I got just a few more here, and then we're going to talk about Swan Princess and dive into that. 3 from the Warner Archive collection. The Fearless Vampire Killers. These are all manufacture-on-demand titles. Fearless Vampire Killers is a Roman Polanski movie with Roman Polanski in it that actually is not what you would normally expect from a Polanski film. It's a bit of a satire. It's funny, but it's weird. It's not even like a Hammer thing. It's just Polanski kind of going completely nuts, and it's why he was sort of a cult figure at the time. Not just for Rosemary's Baby, but for stuff like this, which really just went completely off the rails. Sharon Tate is in the film. So it definitely is something you might want to watch along with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which kind of dovetails or nods to this in certain areas.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a completely bananas spoof satire movie that just belongs to its era. Jackie Chan in Mr. Nice Guy, which includes the original extended cut. There's a great bit on the Warner Archive podcast with my good friend Jeff Briggs, who works over there at the Warner for Warner Brothers and has his fingers on this. Look, here's the thing: Jeff is like the world's greatest expert on all things Hong Kong cinema, more so than me, more than our buddy Andy Klein. I'd even put him up against our friend David Shute, who's sort of the original guy on all this stuff. Jeff just knows his stuff inside out. He was an invaluable resource when I wrote my Jackie Chan book. And what Jeff says is just superb. So I would direct you there to all expertise on this film. Sammo Hung directed this. Mr. Nice Guy is one of the last really good Jackie Chan films before he kind of started to get too old and overexposed in Hollywood to keep doing what he had always done before. But it's a really fun film. It's very, very good, and I just think it's I think it's well worth having in any collection. Also, Days of Wine and Roses with Jack Lemmon.
Yeah.
Movie that doesn't get enough credit because I think when the Lost Weekend won all the accolades roughly around the same general time, by the time Jack Lemmon does Days of Wine and Roses, the alcoholic genre had sort of had all the steam taken out of it.
Yeah.
But Days of Wine and Roses, in many respects, is a better film than The Lost Weekend.
Wonderful performance.
It's tremendous. It's just tremendous. Blake Edwards directed it, one of his handful of great dramas. And as a study of alcoholism, Jack Lemmon and Lee Remick are still. I mean, it still holds. It's one of the best. It hasn't dated at all. It's just absolutely terrific. Jack Klugman, Jack Lemmon's buddy and screen partner, also shows up in this. Great Henry Mancini music, as you would expect for a Blake Edwards movie from the time. It is beautiful on Blu-ray and highly, highly recommended. This movie is as powerful now as it always was. It is just absolutely beautiful. Going to talk for a moment about the Swan Princess. So the Swan Princess came out in 1994, and it was Rick Rich, who was one of the former, sort of a second generation of Disney animators who came from the the Nine Old Men, along with Don Bluth. Rick Rich went out on his own, as Don Bluth did, and made the Swan Princess, which is a certainly Disney inspired in many ways, but it has been an unbelievable franchise since 1994. It is right up there with Land Before Time as far as an animated franchise that outnumbers all the others. They keep making these, and they keep being successful. I had a chance to talk to Rick Rich and his producing partner Seldon Young about the 25th anniversary of the film, which is out now in a beautiful, beautiful Blu-ray from Sony, and which can also be found in 4K on digital. There's no 4K on disc, but there's 4K online and download and streaming. So the digital of this is where you get the 4K, but you can also get the Blu-ray, which is gorgeous as well. And I have a particularly interesting relationship with the Swan Princess. They were promoting the hell out of this thing in 1994 when I was at the Cannes Film Festival. And they threw a party there at the castle just outside of Cannes, the Lanapool Castle, where a lot of parties get thrown. The moving picture party used to be thrown there every year. But what the Swan Princess people did at that time is beyond belief. They were promoting the movie. Suddenly, all my press friends and I, my Swedish and Canadian friends, we all got invitations to the party. It's like a formal thing. We sat down. We had the most opulent dinner. It was like you were really in a fairy tale. These incredible desserts that were done up looking like swans. And then there was a fireworks show at the end. You got to stand on the balconies looking out into the ocean, and fireworks were shut off. Most amazing party I've ever been to. I kid you not. It's the most amazing, elegant fairy tale party in the world. And of course, they showed you footage from the movie because you're there to promote the movie. But Rick Rich is a classy guy. Seldon Young, classy guy. They made a classy movie. It still holds up. And they have wonderful special features on this, making of stuff, 5 sing-along songs. Swan Lake done as a fairy tale Disney-style film. It's a delight. So with that, I'm going to take everybody out on this wonderful interview that I had with Rick Rich and Seldon Young.
I am so thrilled to be able to talk right now with Seldon Young, producer of The Swan Princess, and Rick Rich, director of The Swan Princess. I have that right. Am I correct?
You do. Need to add one thing on Rick's. He is also a producer.
Oh, also a producer. But you guys, you're the creative team that made The Swan Princess possible. And that was such. You know this, and I mentioned this before we got on, but it's in 1994 when The Swan Princess was made. You had a big bash at the Cannes Film Festival, and I was there with some Swedish friends and a Canadian friend. And they all agreed it was the best time that they ever had at the Cannes Film Festival. And I that was my 3rd year there. My Canadian friend had gone for 15, 16, 17 years. We'd never seen anything like it. You threw the party of all parties at a film festival that is known for having the party of all parties. But it was really amazing. I want people to understand. It was this wonderful film, a wonderful fairy tale film, one of the few that is made sort of outside of the Disney framework. And you threw this amazing, classic, wonderful party with desserts and dinner, and it was a classy affair, and it ended up with fireworks, and it was all at the castle at La Napoule, and it was really just amazing. So you created memories, both real and in the movie. Talk for just a second about the origin of The Swan Princess, when it came to be. Obviously, I'm going to guess that Disney films were an inspiration and that you kind of wanted to elevate yourselves to that bar. But after the other animation that you'd been doing independently, what led from that to this?
So can I, before that question is addressed, Wade, I want to respond to the party that was at Cannes and why we did what we did, that we thought that if we could put on something so exquisite, which included all of our characters in costume, in the primary film festival, it would set this film in iconic nature forever. Now, it took us a while to get there, and we may have discussions about that. That being said, we also held a big party on for the 25-year anniversary, and it was a wonderful bash. And people are saying the same thing of that party that we held in Hollywood on the 24th of October. Now, I want Rick to talk about where the origins came from, because he had such a great upbringing to get to where it's at.
So, obviously, I loved all the Disney classics, and when we were talking about doing an animated feature, our first one, I wanted to do something that was in the vein of a Cinderella, a Snow White, or a Sleeping Beauty, something that would have the classic fairy tale elements and something that would be timeless. And we searched and searched. It was really a long search to finally find something. We found obviously Swan Lake, which is also a fairy tale, and as is famously known as the ballet. And so that's what we decided that we were going to try to do. And it wasn't an easy fairy tale to crack, story-wise, but time was on our side, and we got it. And we made a classic fairy tale. And I think now, 25 years later, it's been proven that it has withheld and has upheld through 25 years.
And you guys have, you've been sort of working with the Swan Princess world many times over since then as well, and it's done well for you, and it has a following. I mean, it has an almost uncanny following. I can't think of any other animated world that is comparable, other than perhaps The Land Before Time, which Universal has turned into a mini franchise as well. Talk about that for a second too.
So we like to claim, Wade, that we are the world's most successful independent animated movie franchise. And we kind of classify that because even if you take Land Before Time as kind of the other film out there that was animation that's outside Disney. I mean, there are many, but not with the kind of franchise presence that Swan Princess has. That having 10 full-length feature films, name 10 film franchises that have that. Swan Princess and Land Before Time are the only two animated films that sit in that category, but it is owned by Universal.
Yeah.
So, it puts us in a very unique place. And you're right, our audience, it took a while, but you know what? With having a great story that Rick created with the team, turned this into a franchise that those children that were brought up on it 25 years ago, 24 years ago, 23 years ago, became their favorite film of all time. Mm-hmm. And today, them being millennials, they want to grow their kids up on it the same way. So they're doing the same thing, bringing them up on it. So all of a sudden, we got this presence of hundreds of millions of fans worldwide in about 130 something odd countries.
And I know a lot of them, and my friends in Sweden still will email me and say, "You remember that great party?" And that I just love the movie, and my daughter loves it, and it's true. It really has a transcendent legacy. Rick, tell me, here's the challenge that I always kind of wanted to know how you tackled. It's one thing when you're Walt Disney, you're dealing with Snow White or with Sleeping Beauty, where it doesn't exist in another medium to any really memorable degree. You do kind of get to sort of invent it from scratch. But Swan Lake is obviously Swan Lake. Everyone thinks of the ballet. Everyone thinks of that music. It already exists in another medium. How do you tackle a story like that and say, we're going to be faithful to it insofar as people are familiar with it in the other form, but we're going to reinvent it in a way that lets it be its own thing in another medium? How do you that seems to me an almost really daunting challenge, and you pulled it off. How did you tackle that?
Well, I think we tackled it by using the classical elements of animation. We needed to, I think the ultimate story is kind of a downer because I think the swan dies at the end. We knew we couldn't do that. And so we wanted to create a love story. So everything that we did was trying to build the love between Derek and Odette and show them in a really strong relationship. And I don't think to this very day that there is a love relationship in an animated feature that comes anywhere near to what we accomplished in The Swan Princess. And I think that's one of the things that has really propelled it and held its interest. The other thing was that we knew we needed to add characters that would be funny and entertaining. And so all of these elements had to be added to the story. We kept the name Odette. We kept the name Rothbart. The prince in it is called Siegfried. We didn't think that was going to fly with today's audience. And so Derek seems to be a timeless name, Prince Derek. And then there was the elements of the magic that was required in it. And the thing that really helped us is when we came up with the moon. We needed an item, some kind of a magical thing that we could use for a timing where Odette would be a swan for some of the time and a human the other time. And then there had to be a time when she couldn't change. And the moon, when we came up with the moon idea, we were so excited because there's that one night every month when the moon doesn't shine. And that really is what cracked the story for us.
What was your creative process? I mean, how collaborative was it? How did you lead the story meetings? What was the process by which when you say you cracked it, I mean, what kind of work and process went into cracking those problems?
Well, you have to realize that Brian and I worked on the script for almost 2 years. That's where it all happened. And then, we had to have a really strong script. What's really interesting, though, is when we started to test the picture after we had some animatics up, and we found out that the audience wasn't really excited so much about Derek. And we had to go back in, and we made him into an incredible guy instead of this somebody that they really didn't like. It was really interesting. Yeah. And so if you look at what we changed, he was the only person left in the kingdom that absolutely believed that Odette was still alive and he was going to find her and he was going to practice. And he would never, his mother said Roger says he will never marry anyone. And, except Odette. And so all of a sudden, we turned him into this really kind and absolutely totally committed to this, and it changed the feeling that the audience had about Derek.
Just so I understand, so you had written the script, and then you created animatics, and you did a rough assembly of animatics to represent the story, and it was based on reaction to that you went back and changed the script. Do I understand that correctly?
We did. Yep.
There was another step, a couple of steps in there.
Yes, I'm simplifying it, but yeah.
That's simplifying it. Just even as I got involved and our other producer got involved in this entire process, Rick had this very interesting setup in the studio. I thought your audience might be interested in this really interesting setup. That every time we came in to look at the other films that we were doing, that he had storyboards all along, kind of corkboard that he had all set up. And he said, let me tell you where we're at on all the storyboards. So it wasn't animatics first, it was storyboards after they had written the script, and then they had to rewrite it again and rewrite it again. So it was constantly in that flux of change in storyboarding. And then taken to animatics to be tested. And sometimes in testing, several different times, we were a long ways along, and we had to change sequences of that story, which was very costly.
Wow. I mean, and so much of this has changed now with the move to 3D animation and computers. And I think we've lost something too. I mean, I hear this from a lot of people who say that it forces you to be more deliberative when you are shooting film versus digital, when you are typing on a typewriter versus a word processor, when you're editing film versus nonlinear. And it seems to me that animators often feel the same way about 2D hand-drawn animation versus doing it on a computer, that it forces you to be deliberative in a way that you might not be when you can sort of change anything on the fly. Is that your experience as well? Do you feel that we've lost maybe something in the process?
Well, we've lost and we've gained. That's the interesting thing about CGI. The difficult thing in 2D animation is always getting the artist that can draw the character on model. That is even at Disney, that is a struggle. That was always a struggle. CGI, you don't have that. You design the character, and no matter what angle you shoot it at, she looks right, or he looks right, or whatever the character is looks right. What you lose, what I think we lose, is the looseness that we're capable to get in the actual human drawing of a character. The human and just running Swan 1 versus what we're doing now in CGI, there is a looseness, there is a broadness. We can change the shape of a mouth to anything we want. We can stretch the body. We can do all of that. And you can't do that in CGI. It gets much more complicated to do that. So there's a trade-off in camera. Camera moves in 2D are pretty much straight in or to the side. They're just pretty much linear moves. CGI, we can make it look just like a live action camera. So there's lots of trade-offs, and both have their strong points and both have their weaknesses.
And so
let me
I guess
jump
we
in on this.
Yes,
let me jump on this too, Wade, because one of the specific things you lose when you're going from 2D to 3D is we're so deliberate in what we do because it takes a lot of time. Realize that we got up to as high as 350 artists that were drawing and painting this.
Wow.
And all of these people absolutely love what they do. And you're talking about, when Rick talked about 2 years to create the script, you're talking anywhere between 5 and 6 years to get to the point where you can release the film. And so everything deliberate, and the love of what they do comes through to the audience. When you're doing CGI, it's a short period of time to get it done. But I will tell you, even with CGI, the way Rick does it and many others don't, there's a deliberate nature. You're doing storyboarding almost the same way. Some of them do it on the computer. Some of them we have to scan in because they still do it by hand. And so, Rick goes through a process that makes it still has a similar template to the way we used to do 2D. It just has to port off in a faster way, a lot less people, and the trade-offs start to play in. I don't know, Rick, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, let me say one other thing that I think is really worth saying, because this really came out at our 25th anniversary party just a week or so ago. We had a lot of our original staff and team came to the showing because we had remastered the picture, and we showed it on the big screen again, and had been shown on the big screen for 25 years. And the most rewarding thing to me was that have the old staff come up and say what a fun time it was working on that picture. They've never had it since, and they'd never had it before. There was a camaraderie, there was a love, there was total dedication. We had something to prove by doing that picture. Every one of us who worked on it wanted to prove something, and it gave us an opportunity to do something that very few at that time had really been able to do. And we look back on it with the fondest of memories, which is really quite an accomplishment.
How do you manage when you have 350 artists? I can't even imagine how you manage that. I mean, I know everyone has their different teams and their departments and their roles, but that just seems like a really, really daunting process to keep everyone on the same page and to make sure that you have a cohesive vision. How difficult is that?
Well, you have to realize, I had been trained at Disney, and I knew the process backwards and forwards. And so I didn't work with all 350 directly. I worked with my key people, my key animators, my key storyboard artists,
right.
My key background painters. I only worked with the key people, and then they had their staff that they worked with. And so when you start fanning it down to everyone, it's a very manageable kind of a thing, a very, very exciting kind of a thing. And
so it really I was going to say it really is still sort of the same process then that Walt innovated originally, and which has sort of trickled out to everyone since that time, since those early days in the 30s.
Well, yes. I mean, we did the Swan Princess pretty much just like I done worked on the features at Disney. Absolutely, yeah. That's exactly how we did it. That's how I was trained. I was trained by some of the, one of the 9 old men. And it was just fantastic. So I had have great memories and a great appreciation for what Disney taught me. Gave me the credentials to do this.
What does the future hold for the Swan Princess as a franchise, as sort of an iconic film, and everything else that's tied to it? What does it hold for the future? What does it still mean to you guys?
Listen, we've put our heart and soul into it for the last 25 years, having 9 present films out, along with a 10th that will come out next year. We think, based upon what has happened with our remastering, restoring to ultra high def 4K, will set us for the next 25 plus years. It's a forever film. And there's future opportunity all the way coming down the pike, even to potential TV, which we have something that we're working on there that's a little bit of an offshoot, to what we think could be one of the biggest box office hits worldwide, primarily because you marry the Swan Princess with all those worldwide dancers that know Swan Lake, that also know Swan Princess, that a live-action version like Disney does could be an enormous success. It's just a matter of time.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for speaking with me today. And congratulations. 25 years, a film legacy is a rare thing. And, it's rare that people create any number of films, certainly one, much less more than one, that sort of lingers in the consciousness for that long a period of time. So you've contributed something really, really wonderful to film legacy, and I thank you for it, not just for me and on behalf of my friends and my family, but certainly on behalf of the millions of people who have continued to make the Swan Princess a beloved franchise. It's really an amazing achievement. Anything that you would like to add before we kind of wrap this up?
Yes. I want to add one real important piece to the legacy. It's our belief, very strong belief, and I think we're pretty well right. Swan Princess was the last fully hand-drawn, hand-painted, cel-animated film to be released in North America.
Wow.
Yep. That is legacy.
Gentlemen, Rick Rich, Seldon Young, thank you so much. Congratulations again, and we look forward to all the many, many other great films that you are going to make for us in the future. Really looking forward to it. Thank you again.
Thanks, Wade.
All right.
Thank you, Wade. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.